Welcome. This is a training video on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child for providers working with orphaned and vulnerable children throughout the world. About us. The Sanctuary Network is a non-religious nonprofit working to ensure the needs of orphans and vulnerable children in developing nations. A little about the purpose of this training video. 1. The purpose of this video is to gain a basic understanding of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. 2. To understand its impact on services to orphaned and vulnerable children. What is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child (UNCRC), adopted in 1989, is a landmark international treaty that outlines the fundamental rights of children and the obligations of governments to protect and uphold these rights. For providers of services to orphaned and vulnerable children, the UNCRC serves as a critical framework ensuring every child receives care, protection, and opportunities for development. Article 1. For the purposes of the present convention, a child means every human being below the age of 18 years, unless under the law applicable to the child, majority is attained earlier. Meaning, all children are covered under this convention until age 18. Article 2. 1. States parties shall respect and ensure the rights set forth in the present convention to each child within their jurisdiction without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents' or legal guardian's race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic or social origin, property, disability, birth or other status. 2. States parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that the child is protected against all forms of discrimination or punishment on the basis of the status, activities, expressed opinions, or beliefs of the child's parents, legal guardians, or family members. Meaning, all children are protected from discrimination irregardless of their race, color, sex, language, religion, political beliefs, nationality, ethnic or social origin, property, disability, birth or other status. Article 3. 1. In all actions concerning children, whether undertaken by public or private social welfare institutions, courts of law, administrative authorities or legislative bodies, the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration. 2. States parties undertake to ensure the child such protection and care as is necessary for his or her well-being, taking into account the rights and duties of his or her parents, legal guardians, or other individuals legally responsible for him or her, and, to this end, shall take all appropriate legislative and administrative measures. 3. States parties shall ensure that the institutions, services and facilities responsible for the care or protection of children shall conform with the standards established by competent authorities. Particularly in the areas of safety, health, in the number and suitability of their staff, as well as competent supervision. Meaning, all adults and governments should act in the best interest of the child. Article 4. States parties shall undertake all appropriate legislative, administrative, and other measures for the implementation of the rights recognized in the present convention. With regard to economic, social and cultural rights, states parties shall undertake such measures to the maximum extent of their available resources and, where needed, within the framework of international cooperation. Meaning, all children have the right to have their rights made a reality by the government. Article 5. States parties shall respect the responsibilities, rights and duties of parents or, where applicable, the members of the extended family or community as provided for by local custom, legal guardians or other persons legally responsible for the child, to provide, in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child, appropriate direction and guidance in the exercise by the child of the rights recognized in the present convention. Meaning, all children have the right to be given guidance by their parents, family, or legal guardians. Article 6. 1. States parties recognize that every child has the inherent right to life. 2. States parties shall ensure to the maximum extent possible the survival and development of the child. Meaning, all children have the right to live, survive, and develop. Article 7. 1. The child shall be registered immediately after birth and shall have the right from birth to a name, the right to acquire a nationality and, as far as possible, the right to know and be cared for by his or her parents. 2. States parties shall ensure the implementation of these rights in accordance with their national law and their obligations under the relevant international instruments in this field, in particular where the child would otherwise be stateless. Meaning, all children have the right to have a name and a nationality. Article 8. 1. States parties undertake to respect the right of the child to preserve his or her identity, including nationality, name and family relations as recognized by law without unlawful interference. 2. Where a child is illegally deprived of some or all of the elements of his or her identity, states parties shall provide appropriate assistance and protection, with a view to re-establishing speedily his or her identity. Meaning, all children have the right to an identity. This includes a nationality, name, and family relations. Article 9. 1. States parties shall ensure that a child shall not be separated from his or her parents against their will, except when competent authorities subject to judicial review determine, in accordance with applicable law and procedures, that such separation is necessary for the best interests of the child. Such determination may be necessary in a particular case such as one involving abuse or neglect of the child by the parents, or one where the parents are living separately and a decision must be made as to the child's place of residence. 2. In any proceedings pursuant to paragraph 1 of the present article, all interested parties shall be given an opportunity to participate in the proceedings and make their views known. 3. States parties shall respect the right of the child who is separated from one or both parents to maintain personal relations and direct contact with both parents on a regular basis, except if it is contrary to the child's best interests. 4. Where such separation results from any action initiated by a state party, such as the detention, imprisonment, exile, deportation or death, including death arising from any cause while the person is in the custody of the state, of one or both parents or of the child, that state party shall, upon request, provide the parents, the child or, if appropriate, another member of the family with the essential information concerning the whereabouts of the absent members of the family unless the provision of the information would be detrimental to the well-being of the child. States parties shall further ensure that the submission of such a request shall of itself entail no adverse consequences for the persons concerned. Meaning, all children have the right to live with their parents, unless the child is in danger to do so. Article 10. 1. In accordance with the obligation of states parties under Article 9, Paragraph 1, applications by a child or his or her parents to enter or leave a state party for the purpose of family reunification shall be dealt with by states parties in a positive, humane and expeditious manner. States parties shall further ensure that the submission of such a request shall entail no adverse consequences for the applicants and for the members of their family. 2. A child whose parents reside in different states shall have the right to maintain on a regular basis, save in exceptional circumstances, personal relations and direct contacts with both parents. Towards that end and in accordance with the obligation of states parties under Article 9, Paragraph 1, states parties shall respect the right of the child and his or her parents to leave any country, including their own, and to enter their own country. The right to leave any country shall be subject only to such restrictions as are prescribed by law and which are necessary to protect the national security, public order, public health, or morals or the rights and freedoms of others and are consistent with the other rights recognized in the present convention. Meaning, all children have the right to be reunited with their parents if they are separated in different countries. States parties shall take measures to combat the illicit transfer and non-return of children abroad. 2. To this end, states parties shall promote the conclusion of bilateral or multilateral agreements or accession to existing agreements. Meaning, all children have the right to be protected from kidnapping. Article 12. 1. States parties shall assure to the child who is capable of forming his or her own views the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child, the views of the child being given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. 2. For this purpose, the child shall in particular be provided the opportunity to be heard in any judicial and administrative proceedings affecting the child, either directly, or through a representative or an appropriate body, in a manner consistent with the procedural rules of national law. Meaning, all children have the right to an opinion and for it to be listened to and taken seriously. Article 13. 1. The child shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing or in print, in the form of art, or through any other media of the child's choice. 2. The exercise of this right may be subject to certain restrictions, but these shall only be such as are provided by law and are necessary. A. For respect of the rights or reputations of others, or b. For the protection of national security or of public order, ordre public, or of public health or morals. Meaning, all children have the right to discover things and express themselves through art, speaking, and writing, unless it impedes on the rights of others. Article 14. 1. States parties shall respect the right of the child to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. 2. States parties shall respect the rights and duties of the parents and, when applicable, legal guardians, to provide direction to the child in the exercise of his or her right in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child. 3. Freedom to manifest one's religion or beliefs may be subject only to such limitations as are prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health or morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. Meaning, all children have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion with your parents' guidance. Article 15. 1. States parties recognize the rights of the child to freedom of association and to freedom of peaceful assembly. 2. No restrictions may be placed on the exercise of these rights other than those imposed in conformity with the law and which are necessary in a democratic society in the interests of national security or public safety, public order, ordre public, the protection of public health or morals, or the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. Meaning, all children have the right to be with friends and associate with others, unless this breaks the rights of others. Article 16. 1. No child shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference with his or her privacy, family, home or correspondence, nor to unlawful attacks on his or her honor and reputation. 2. The child has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. Meaning, all children have the right to privacy and for it to be respected. Article 17. States parties recognize the important function performed by the mass media and shall ensure that the child has access to information and material from a diversity of national and international sources, especially those aimed at the promotion of his or her social, spiritual and moral well-being and physical and mental health. To this end, states parties shall a. Encourage the mass media to disseminate information and material of social and cultural benefit to the child and in accordance with the spirit of Article 29. B. Encourage international cooperation in the production, exchange and dissemination of such information and material from a diversity of cultural, national and international sources. C. Encourage the production and dissemination of children's books. D. Encourage the mass media to have particular regard to the linguistic needs of the child who belongs to a minority group or who is indigenous. E. Encourage the development of appropriate guidelines for the protection of the child from information and material injurious to his or her well-being, bearing in mind the provisions of Articles 13 and 18. Meaning, all children have the right to access information from the media, radios, newspapers, television, etc., from all around the world. Children should also be protected from information that could be harmful. Article 18. 1. States parties shall use their best efforts to ensure recognition of the principle that both parents have common responsibilities for the upbringing and development of the child. Parents are, as the case may be, legal guardians, have the primary responsibility for the upbringing and development of the child. The best interests of the child will be their basic concern. 2. For the purpose of guaranteeing and promoting the rights set forth in the present convention, states parties shall render appropriate assistance to parents and legal guardians in the performance of their child-rearing responsibilities and shall ensure the development of institutions, facilities and services for the care of children. 3. States parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that children of working parents have the right to benefit from child care services and facilities for which they are eligible. Meaning, all children have the right to be brought up by their parents or legal guardians. Article 19. 1. States parties shall take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse, while in the care of parents, legal guardians or any other person who has the care of the child. 2. Such protective measures should, as appropriate, include effective procedures for the establishment of social programs to provide necessary support for the child and for those who have the care of the child, as well as for other forms of prevention and for identification, reporting, referral, investigation, treatment and follow-up of instances of child maltreatment described heretofore, and, as appropriate, for judicial involvement. Meaning, all children have the right to be protected from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect or negligent treatment, maltreatment or exploitation, including sexual abuse. Article 20. 1. A child temporarily or permanently deprived of his or her family environment, or in whose own best interests cannot be allowed to remain in that environment, shall be entitled to special protection and assistance provided by the state. 2. States parties shall in accordance with their national laws ensure alternative care for such a child. 3. Such care could include, inter alia, foster placement, kafala of Islamic law, adoption or if necessary placement in suitable institutions for the care of children. When considering solutions, due regard shall be paid to the desirability of continuity in a child's upbringing and to the child's ethnic, religious, cultural and linguistic background. Meaning, all children have the right to special protection and assistance if they can't live with their parents. 1. States parties that recognize and/or permit the system of adoption shall ensure that the best interests of the child shall be the paramount consideration and they shall a. Ensure that the adoption of a child is authorized only by competent authorities who determine, in accordance with applicable law and procedures and on the basis of all pertinent and reliable information, that the adoption is permissible in view of the child's status concerning parents, relatives and legal guardians and that, if required, the persons concerned have given their informed consent to the adoption on the basis of such counseling as may be necessary. B. Recognize that inter-country adoption may be considered as an alternative means of child's care, if the child cannot be placed in a foster or an adoptive family or cannot in any suitable manner be cared for in the child's country of origin. C. Ensure that the child concerned by inter-country adoption enjoys safeguards and standards equivalent to those existing in the case of national adoption. D. Take all appropriate measures to ensure that, in inter-country adoption, the placement does not result in improper financial gain for those involved in it. E. Promote, where appropriate, the objectives of the present article by concluding bilateral or multilateral arrangements or agreements, and endeavor, within this framework, to ensure that the placement of the child in another country is carried out by competent authorities or organs. Meaning, all children have the right to have the best care for them if they are adopted, fostered, or living in care. Article 22. 1. States parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure that a child who is seeking refugee status or who is considered a refugee in accordance with applicable international or domestic law and procedures shall, whether unaccompanied or accompanied by his or her parents or by any other person, receive appropriate protection and humanitarian assistance in the enjoyment of applicable rights set forth in the present Convention and in other international human rights or humanitarian instruments to which the said states are parties. 2. For this purpose, states parties shall provide, as they consider appropriate, cooperation in any efforts by the United Nations and other competent intergovernmental organizations or non-governmental organizations cooperating with the United Nations to protect and assist such a child and to trace the parents or other members of the family of any refugee child in order to obtain information necessary for reunification with his or her family. In cases where no parents or other members of the family can be found, the child shall be accorded the same protection as any other child permanently or temporarily deprived of his or her family environment for any reason, as set forth in the present Convention. Meaning, all children have the right to special protection and assistance if they are a refugee. Article 23. 1. States parties recognize that a mentally or physically disabled child should enjoy a full and decent life, in conditions which ensure dignity, promote self-reliance and facilitate the child's active participation in the community. 2. States parties recognize the right of the disabled child to special care and shall encourage and ensure the extension, subject to available resources, to the eligible child and those responsible for his or her care, of assistance for which application is made and which is appropriate to the child's condition and to the circumstances of the parents or others caring for the child. 3. Recognizing the special needs of a disabled child, assistance extended in accordance with paragraph 2 of the present article shall be provided free of charge, whenever possible, taking into account the financial resources of the parents or others caring for the child, and shall be designed to ensure that the disabled child has effective access to and receives education, training, health care services, rehabilitation services, preparation for employment and recreation opportunities in a manner conducive to the child's achieving the fullest possible social integration and individual development, including his or her cultural and spiritual development. 4. States parties shall promote, in the spirit of international cooperation, the exchange of appropriate information in the field of preventive health care and of medical, psychological and functional treatment of disabled children, including dissemination of and access to information concerning methods of rehabilitation, education and vocational services, with the aim of enabling states parties to improve their capabilities and skills and to widen their experience in these areas. In this regard, particular account shall be taken of the needs of developing countries. Meaning, all children with a disability have the right to special care and education to ensure dignity, promote self-reliance, and facilitate the child's active participation in the community. Article 24. 1. States parties recognize the right of the child to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health and to facilities for the treatment of illness and rehabilitation of health. States parties shall strive to ensure that no child is deprived of his or her right of access to such health care services. 2. States parties shall pursue full implementation of this right and, in particular, shall take appropriate measures. A. To diminish infant and child mortality. B. To ensure the provision of necessary medical assistance and health care to all children with emphasis on the development of primary health care. C. To combat disease and malnutrition, including within the framework of primary health care, through, inter alia, the application of readily available technology and through the provision of adequate nutritious foods and clean drinking water, taking into consideration the dangers and risks of environmental pollution. D. To ensure appropriate prenatal and postnatal health care for mothers. E. To ensure that all segments of society, in particular parents and children, are informed, have access to education and are supported in the use of basic knowledge of child health and nutrition, the advantages of breastfeeding, hygiene and environmental sanitation and the prevention of accidents. F. To develop preventive health care, guidance for parents and family planning education and services. 3. States parties shall take all effective and appropriate measures with a view to abolishing traditional practices prejudicial to the health of children. 4. States parties undertake to promote and encourage international cooperation with a view to achieving progressively the full realization of the right recognized in the present article. In this regard, particular account shall be taken of the needs of developing countries. Meaning, all children have a right to the best health possible, to medical care, and to information that will help them to stay healthy. Article 25. States parties recognize the right of a child who has been placed by the competent authorities for the purposes of care, protection or treatment of his or her physical or mental health, to a periodic review of the treatment provided to the child and all other circumstances relevant to his or her placement. Meaning, all children have the right to have your living arrangements checked regularly if they are living in the care of a facility. Article 26. 1. States parties shall recognize for every child the right to benefit from Social Security, including social insurance, and shall take the necessary measures to achieve the full realization of this right in accordance with their national law. 2. The benefits should, where appropriate, be granted, taking into account the resources and the circumstances of the child and persons having responsibility for the maintenance of the child, as well as any other consideration relevant to an application for benefits made by or on behalf of the child. Meaning, all children have the right to help from the government if they are poor or in need. Article 27. 1. States parties recognize the right of every child to a standard of living adequate for the child's physical, mental, spiritual, moral and social development. 2. The parents or others responsible for the child have the primary responsibility to secure, within their abilities and financial capacities, the conditions of living necessary for the child's development. 3. States parties, in accordance with national conditions and within their means, shall take appropriate measures to assist parents and others responsible for the child to implement this right and shall in case of need provide material assistance and support programs, particularly with regard to nutrition, clothing and housing. 4. States parties shall take all appropriate measures to secure the recovery of maintenance for the child from the parents or other persons having financial responsibility for the child, both within the state party and from abroad. In particular, where the person having financial responsibility for the child lives in a state different from that of the child, states parties shall promote the accession to international agreements or the conclusion of such agreements, as well as the making of other appropriate arrangements. Meaning, all children have the right to a standard of living adequate for the child's physical, mental, spiritual, moral, and social development. Article 28. 1. States parties recognize the right of the child to education, and with a view to achieving this right progressively and on the basis of equal opportunity, they shall, in particular, a. Make primary education compulsory and available free to all. b. Encourage the development of different forms of secondary education, including general and vocational education, make them available and accessible to every child, and take appropriate measures such as the introduction of free education and offering financial assistance in case of need. c. Make higher education accessible to all on the basis of capacity by every appropriate means. d. Make educational and vocational information and guidance available and accessible to all children. e. Take measures to encourage regular attendance at schools and the reduction of dropout rates. 2. States parties shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that school discipline is administered in a manner consistent with the child's human dignity and in conformity with the present convention. 3. States parties shall promote and encourage international cooperation in matters relating to education, in particular with a view to contributing to the elimination of ignorance and illiteracy throughout the world and facilitating access to scientific and technical knowledge and modern teaching methods. In this regard, particular account shall be taken of the needs of developing countries. Meaning, all children have the right to an education. Article 29. 1. States parties agree that the education of the child shall be directed to a. The development of the child's personality, talents and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential. b. The development of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and for the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. c. The development of respect for the child's parents, his or her own cultural identity, language and values, for the national values of the country in which the child is living, the country from which he or she may originate, and for civilizations different from his or her own. D. The preparation of the child for responsible life in a free society, in the spirit of understanding, peace, tolerance, equality of sexes, and friendship among all peoples, ethnic, national and religious groups and persons of indigenous origin. E. The development of respect for the natural environment. 2. No part of the present article or Article 28 shall be construed so as to interfere with the liberty of individuals and bodies to establish and direct educational institutions, subject always to the observance of the principles set forth in paragraph 1 of the present article and to the requirements that the education given in such institutions shall conform to such minimum standards as may be laid down by the state. Meaning, all children have the right to education which tries to develop their personality and abilities, encourages you to respect other people's rights and values, and to respect the environment. Article 30. In those states in which ethnic, religious or linguistic minorities or persons of indigenous origin exist, a child belonging to such a minority or who is indigenous shall not be denied the right, in community with other members of his or her group, to enjoy his or her own culture, to profess and practice his or her own religion, or to use his or her own language. Meaning, all children have the right to practice and identify with their own culture, especially with regards to indigenous and minority populations. Article 31. 1. States parties recognize the right of the child to rest and leisure, to engage in play and recreational activities appropriate to the age of the child and to participate freely in cultural life and the arts. 2. States parties shall respect and promote the right of the child to participate fully in cultural and artistic life and shall encourage the provision of appropriate and equal opportunities for cultural, artistic, recreational and leisure activity. Meaning, all children have the right to recreational and leisure activities. Article 32. 1. States parties recognize the right of the child to be protected from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with the child's education, or to be harmful to the child's health or physical, mental, spiritual, moral or social development. 2. States parties shall take legislative, administrative, social and educational measures to ensure the implementation of the present article. To this end, and having regard to the relevant provisions of other international instruments, states parties shall in particular: A. Provide for a minimum age or minimum ages for admission to employment. B. Provide for appropriate regulation of the hours and conditions of employment. C. Provide for appropriate penalties or other sanctions to ensure the effective enforcement of the present article. Meaning, all children have the right to be protected from exploitation and hazardous work. Article 33. States parties shall take all appropriate measures, including legislative, administrative, social and educational measures, to protect children from the illicit use of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances as defined in the relevant international treaties, and to prevent the use of children in the illicit production and trafficking of such substances. Meaning, all children have the right to be protected from illegal drugs. Article 34. States parties undertake to protect the child from all forms of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. For these purposes, states parties shall in particular take all appropriate national, bilateral and multilateral measures to prevent: A. The inducement or coercion of a child to engage in any unlawful sexual activity. B. The exploitative use of children in prostitution or other unlawful sexual practices. C. The exploitative use of children in pornographic performances and materials. Meaning, all children have the right to be protected from sexual exploitation. Article 35. States parties shall take all appropriate national, bilateral and multilateral measures to prevent the abduction of, the sale of or traffic in children for any purpose or in any form. Meaning, all children have the right to protection from human trafficking and slavery. Article 36. States parties shall protect the child against all other forms of exploitation prejudicial to any aspects of the child's welfare. Meaning, all children have the right to protection from any other form of exploitation or harm. Article 37. States parties shall ensure that: A. No child shall be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Neither capital punishment nor life imprisonment without possibility of release shall be imposed for offenses committed by persons below 18 years of age. B. No child shall be deprived of his or her liberty unlawfully or arbitrarily. The arrest, detention or imprisonment of a child shall be in conformity with the law and shall be used only as a measure of last resort and for the shortest appropriate period of time. C. Every child deprived of liberty shall be treated with humanity and respect for the inherent dignity of the human person, and in a manner which takes into account the needs of persons of his or her age. In particular, every child deprived of liberty shall be separated from adults unless it is considered in the child's best interest not to do so and shall have the right to maintain contact with his or her family through correspondence and visits, save in exceptional circumstances. D. Every child deprived of his or her liberty shall have the right to prompt access to legal and other appropriate assistance, as well as the right to challenge the legality of the deprivation of his or her liberty before a court or other competent, independent and impartial authority, and to a prompt decision on any such action. Meaning, all children have the right not to be punished in a cruel or hurtful way if found guilty of a criminal offense. Article 38. 1. States parties undertake to respect and to ensure respect for rules of international humanitarian law applicable to them in armed conflicts which are relevant to the child. 2. States parties shall take all feasible measures to ensure that persons who have not attained the age of 15 years do not take a direct part in hostilities. 3. States parties shall refrain from recruiting any person who has not attained the age of 15 years into their armed forces. In recruiting among those persons who have attained the age of 15 years but who have not attained the age of 18 years, states parties shall endeavor to give priority to those who are oldest. 4. In accordance with their obligations under international humanitarian law to protect the civilian population in armed conflicts, states parties shall take all feasible measures to ensure protection and care of children who are affected by an armed conflict. Meaning, all children have the right to protection from armed conflict and from fighting in a conflict under the age of 15 years old. Article 39. States parties shall take all appropriate measures to promote physical and psychological recovery and social reintegration of a child victim of any form of neglect, exploitation, or abuse, torture or any other form of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, or armed conflicts. Such recovery and reintegration shall take place in an environment which fosters the health, self-respect and dignity of the child. Meaning, all children have the right to assistance if they have been hurt, neglected, or badly treated. Article 40. 1. States parties recognize the right of every child alleged as, accused of, or recognized as having infringed the penal law to be treated in a manner consistent with the promotion of the child's sense of dignity and worth, which reinforces the child's respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms of others and which takes into account the child's age and the desirability of promoting the child's reintegration and the child's assuming a constructive role in society. 2. To this end, and having regard to the relevant provisions of international instruments, states parties shall, in particular, ensure that a. No child shall be alleged as, be accused of, or recognized as having infringed the penal law by reason of acts or omissions that were not prohibited by national or international law at the time they were committed. b. Every child alleged as or accused of having infringed the penal law has at least the following guarantees. I. To be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law. e. To be informed promptly and directly of the charges against him or her, and, if appropriate, through his or her parents or legal guardians, and to have legal or other appropriate assistance in the preparation and presentation of his or her defense. e. To have the matter determined without delay by a competent, independent and impartial authority or judicial body in a fair hearing according to law, in the presence of legal or other appropriate assistance and, unless it is considered not to be in the best interest of the child, in particular, taking into account his or her age or situation, his or her parents or legal guardians. IV. Not to be compelled to give testimony or to confess guilt, to examine or have examined adverse witnesses and to obtain the participation and examination of witnesses on his or her behalf under conditions of equality. V. If considered to have infringed the penal law, to have this decision and any measures imposed in consequence thereof reviewed by a higher competent, independent and impartial authority or judicial body according to law. V. To have the free assistance of an interpreter if the child cannot understand or speak the language used. V. To have his or her privacy fully respected at all stages of the proceedings. 3. States parties shall seek to promote the establishment of laws, procedures, authorities and institutions specifically applicable to children alleged as, accused of, or recognized as having infringed the penal law, and, in particular, a. The establishment of a minimum age below which children shall be presumed not to have the capacity to infringe the penal law. B. Whenever appropriate and desirable, measures for dealing with such children without resorting to judicial proceedings, providing that human rights and legal safeguards are fully respected. 4. A variety of dispositions, such as care, guidance and supervision orders, counseling, probation, foster care, education and vocational training programs and other alternatives to institutional care shall be available to ensure that children are dealt with in a manner appropriate to their well-being and proportionate both to their circumstances and the offense. Meaning, all children have the right to assistance in defending themselves if accused of breaking the law. Article 41. Nothing in the present convention shall affect any provisions which are more conducive to the realization of the rights of the child and which may be contained in a. The law of a state party, or b. International law in force for that state. Meaning, all children have the right to any rights in the laws of your country or internationally that give you better rights than these. Article 42. States parties undertake to make the principles and provisions of the convention widely known, by appropriate and active means, to adults and children alike. Meaning, all adults and children should know about this convention and fully understand the rights of the child. Articles 43 to 54 are about how governments and international organizations will work to give children their rights. For the purposes of this training, these articles are not included in this video. Please see the full version of the UNCRC to review these articles, if needed. Supplemental information. For further information on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, please see other resources through the United Nations and other partner organizations. Additional information and resources can include a simplified version of the UNCRC for review with children so they may understand fully their rights. Get the full version of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and more educational resources through UNICEF at www.unicef.org. Staff and partners of the Sanctuary Network can find links to this topic and more in the resources area of our website at www.sanctuarynet.org. Thank you for watching our training on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. For more information on the Sanctuary Network and our other resources, please feel free to contact us, or through our members portal.